There is no negotiated solution for this war because this war was provoked by the United States, particularly with the full collaboration of key NATO members, particularly the United Kingdom, the Germans, the Poles, and the French. And this move of NATO to the east to threaten Russia, most people don't realize that in Yavoriv, that military base in western Ukraine that was described as a Ukrainian military base was actually a NATO base. It was established as a NATO facility in 2007, even though it had been used as a training site prior to that. The reality is Ukraine has been a de facto member of NATO since at least 2007, and I think you could even make a case to go back to 2005. The only thing it didn't have was an Article 5 guarantee and a financial obligation to kick in some money every month. Other than that, I don't know if you had a chance to read that my 3-part series that I did on this. During that decade from 2000 to 2010, I looked to see which countries hosted the most NATO exercises. Now, by 2004, there were a total of 28 countries in NATO. And the answer I got back shocked me because the number 6 most popular country for hosting NATO exercises was Ukraine. Number 7 was Georgia. Wait a second. Neither Ukraine or Georgia are even NATO members. Yet they're hosting more exercises for NATO and the U.S. European Command than Italy, Spain, Portugal, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Denmark, go down the list, Hungary, that Ukraine was the most popular spot. So this is part of a long-term plan, and where I think Russia's going is this use of NATO exercises on our borders is going to stop. And yet, right now, we're seeing indications that NATO is trying to intensify those exercises on the border. And I think that could definitely become a flashpoint for Russia.
Yeah. And in fact, I want to get to that in just a second, but I want to hit real quick the end of that comment that we just showed from Zelensky, to where he implied that this may not parade the coming up the victory celebration to the end of the Great Patriotic War from the Russian side. Maybe there would be some missiles and something fly. He said there's probably good reason for them to say that. And actually, one of our viewers, Nikos, earlier in the show, he seems to think that they will do that. He's that insane. Others have suggested, he's not that dumb. I mean, it's just a gimmick and a ploy. He certainly wouldn't do that. But would he? Well, I mean, what do you think? Would he actually attempt to do that?
Yeah, I think he probably will. But Russia is prepared to defend against it, and will actually take preemptive measures to deal with that threat. So, they understand what's at risk. Zelensky, if he does that, though, he'll be committing suicide, because an attack that includes an attack on the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping will be in attendance, other members of Europe, Robert Fico of Slovakia, Orban in Hungary. All of a sudden, and Lula of Brazil.
Yeah.
This would be, and on a civilian parade. It was not this is not a military parade per se. This is a commemoration of the victory.
The parade itself obviously is military, but there'd be tens of thousands of civilians there in attendance. So let me ask you a question on that, because here, what is it? I guess a week or so ago, on the 25th, and to be specific, on the 25th of April, when Steve Witkoff went to Moscow, was going to meet with Vladimir Putin again. On that same day, Ukraine chose to assassinate another Russian general, which happened also in December of last year, so not long ago. And yet, what you have not seen is for Russia to be assassinating Ukrainian leaders in Kiev. Why do you suppose that the Russians have not taken that kind of tit for tat action?
If you will, they're not going to lower themselves to that level. They go after the perpetrators. Even they caught the guy who planted the bomb and placed the car bomb there, and he's arrested. He's being put on trial. And Russia actually, even for this, they don't have the death penalty for crimes like this. So, I think they're sending a signal that we're not savages, we're civilized, and we'll deal.
No,
with
that's
these
not
things.
possible. Putin is evil. He's like Hitler. I don't know if you saw that memo.
Yeah. Well, he didn't get the memo. It's just the cartoon caricature that we have created in the West of Vladimir Putin as this evil monster is just, it's a lie. It's a piece of propaganda. But you notice that Russia has, again, they've intensified their military campaign against Ukraine. And they've gone after and hit some targets that have, they're causing significant damage, not just to the Ukrainians, but they've killed a bunch of Polish mercenaries and British mercenaries over the course of the last week. This war will end on military terms, and Russia will dictate those terms. It's that simple.
Well, it's only that simple because we are making it so. Because we're unwilling to take the diplomatic off-ramp that's been offered at any of the diplomatic off-ramps. This is just, I perceive, and maybe you agree as well, this is the last diplomatic opportunity there'll be. I don't think there'll be another offer. I think that once if they start going down this path, it's going to be until they have achieved on the ground what they want, and then they'll just tell you what's left. That's how I see it. Well,
no, I don't disagree with you at all on that. And if I was... if I went back, more than a month and a half ago, and Mr. Lavrov had asked me what would be your advice, my advice was don't trust the West at all. You settle.
I think he's gotten that part already.
Settle this militarily. Force your terms on them, and don't accept any kind of make no concessions, because any concession you make will make they'll view that as just weakness on your part. You may be thinking you're making a humanitarian gesture. They interpret it as weakness. So don't trust them.
And and one of the things that just continues to erode the trust is you mentioned a minute ago something about the Germans. I want to talk about that in the last few minutes we have here, because if the comments of Kellogg are irrational to me, if the mentality exposed by Fareed Zakaria just is detached from reality, and obviously Zelensky's is detached from reality too, I might be tempted to think, okay, well, those are some of the outliers, but the remainder, the bulk of it, will understand, of Europe especially, the war is over, it's lost, and it's going to have an ugly ending, whether it's negotiated here or fought for with there, but then it's going to be over. And so you would think that, all right, well, let's just worry about getting our house in order. But instead, you have the Germans, who have a lot of economic issues of their own, by the way, among the worst in Europe. Their performance, all of these boomerang sanctions that we put on Russia have come back to hurt Germany, maybe worse than any other single European country.
Right.
But now then, here is a video that was released yesterday from the Ministry of Defense in Lithuania about what the Germans are about to do.
We have a clear mission as the German brigade, as the Panzerbrigade 45, the Armored Brigade 45 here in Lithuania, and that is the defense of Lithuania, defense of NATO territory. And we are not doing it alone as a German brigade. There's an entire German division behind, which is really allocated for the defense of this very region here in the Baltics, here in Lithuania. And that's very, I would say, reassuring. We are really taking it very seriously from the German side, and I'm sure but also the other allies are really taking it seriously. We are following our political orders as agreed by our heads of state and government. We are here to defend every inch of NATO territory here in Lithuania.
Now, moving that kind of combat power forward up into the Baltics, close to the actual Russian border. I mean, I want to look at this from a couple of different aspects, but I know you're very tied into a lot of things on the Russian side. There is NATO, which is one issue, but then there's German mechanized forces, which seem to have a different level of emotion. I wonder if you can explain that.
Yeah, 1 in 12 citizens of Russia died when the Germans attacked Russia, the Soviet Union, back in June of 1940, and that they haven't forgotten. I mean, they suffered. Almost every single family lost a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, some family member. And in many cases, the entire families were wiped out, with the exception of one or two. So the idea of Germans coming back to the borders of Russia, and the Russians aren't going to do anything, that's just that's insanity. And the fact that this German officer is so clueless about this is part of the problem. Look, the Russians have largely ignored Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia because they're so tiny. Do you realize that the New York borough of Brooklyn, in terms of population, is bigger than Latvia, is bigger than Estonia, and is the same size as Lithuania? Okay? So we're talking about maybe a grand total between all three countries of 6 million. They couldn't even fill up all of New York City, for God's sake. And
the cumulative total of combat power is just a handful of battalions.
It's a police force.
Yeah.
And so it's, Russia's not losing sleep over that. What they were losing sleep over, though, was they watched year after year, particularly after 2014, when NATO threw Russia out. Russia thwarted NATO's plans to take control of Sevastopol, and they excluded them from the exercises, and then began conducting a minimum of 4 to 5 military exercises every year, joint exercises with NATO and or U.S. troops. And they were conducting them in Ukraine. These were not being conducted some faraway place. These were exercises that involved Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian officers. And, they saw this NATO buildup, and the army was increasing, as I pointed out earlier. This all took place under Donald Trump. And so, the Russian general staff is sitting there watching. Why are they building up a reserve force of 900,000? They've tripled that now in the last 9 years. Actually, they tripled it in the last 3 years, candidly. And then, the rhetoric that was going on, and then the increased attacks from the Ukrainian army into civilian areas in Donetsk and Luhansk. And when Putin presented Joe Biden with a peace deal in December of 2021, and Biden initially said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we could probably do it," and then we got back, and Blinken and all the others said, "Hell no, you're not going to do that." And then Lavrov met with Blinken in January of 2022 and said, "Hey, we've got a real concern about these missiles that you're bringing in to put at bases in Poland and Romania, because that's on our border." And Blinken said, "It's none of your goddamn business. We'll do what we want." So that's why I say this. It wasn't that the Russian, Putin woke up one morning and didn't have his morning coffee, or failed to have a good constitutional, who knows, and just says, I'm upset with the Ukraine. I think we'll launch an attack. Let's do it. No. They were provoked to it, and the initial stage of the military operation, as you pointed out before, was designed to bring pressure to get negotiations underway, which it did. And then the United States sabotaged that.
Yeah.
So the United States has been the problem in this throughout. And here's Donald Trump pretending, "Oh, we're the great mediator. All these other people, boy, they've been the crazy ones." we're there. We got blood on our hands, blood on our clothes. The knife's dripping with blood, and we're going, who killed this guy? We're responsible.
So let me ask you a question, though. There are elements inside the Russian military that I've been reading on some of their media, some of their Telegram channels, etc., that are saying, hey, we aren't going to trust the West with anything, and we should take advantage of the opportunity we got right now, because as you just mentioned, there's 1.5 million total active forces, which means they now have various levels of substantial to pretty good combat experience and modern knowledge. They're equipped with the ways of the modern warfare, and the West is not. And then you see that there was right now there was a desire to have like 64,000 assurance force people, whatever, from this coalition of the willing. And now it's turned out an analysis saying, well, they'll be hard pressed to cobble together more than about 25,000. Europe is going to be hard pressed to come up with that many in terms of an assurance force that they would have some kind of whatever defense against or coalition to deter Russia, right? And then now that you see here, Germany wants to move 5,000 into this really thin strip of land here in the Baltics. Might that not tempt some people in Russia to say, look, even if forget about the Ukraine war, that's going to end one way or the other. But we got to make sure our whole western flank is secured. And if you guys are moving combat power in, this might be the time to act when you can't do anything about it. And if we had to go toe to toe, we could take you out and seal that whole thing on the West. Is there any risk of that?
Oh yeah, tremendous risk of that. And then you have to add into the threats that are being made against Russian shipping in the Baltic Sea. That there are calls from several of these insane people to shut down and prevent Russia from being able to use Kaliningrad, for example. I guess it used to be called Königsberg. It was a German, was sort of one of the headquarters for Prussia before Prussia became Germany. But the NATO, the non-U.S. members of NATO, are increasing their strident rhetoric and are willing to provoke a war, it would look like. And, Russia is prepared. I believe Russia's prepared for that contingency now. And they fully recognize it as a possibility. That's why they're hoping that they can secure a deal with the United States. That, once U.S. is out of the picture, Europe can't do anything. Europe has no power. Europe thinks it does.
Yeah.
But they don't have the military industrial base to produce and sustain troops in the field, to sustain action. Just their line of communication for the resupply is not there. And they can't just, this is not Dorothy from Wizard of Oz clicking her heels together and making three wishes. That's not going to put artillery shells in their hands.
Nope, or put them on target either. But
yeah.
Well, listen, we hope that the worst that can be avoided here, because not only could this be more catastrophic for Ukraine, it could also be catastrophic for Europe. Because look, Russia conventionally, there's no question they could obliterate the Baltics with or without this German contingent in there. There's no problem. This is Suwalki Gap, which is a bottleneck that Russia could close off with the greatest of ease, and then they would all be trapped behind there and then systematically taken out. That's not a problem. The issue is because there are Article 5 guarantees up in that area, you have the potential for nuclear escalation. And that's what it is shocking to me that we're even contemplating that anyone in Europe is contemplating that. It doesn't seem like Trump is, but some others in Europe seem to be willing to monkey around with some of that. And that just baffles me beyond any kind of comprehension and what needs to be avoided at all costs.
Well, and let's not forget, it was Trump who walked away from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, INF agreement. And that, Russia had been abiding by it. But once that agreement was abrogated, what did Russia do? They turned around and developed the Oreshnik missile, which is an intermediate range ballistic missile that would have been illegal and prohibited under the INF treaty. Now, all of Europe faces the possibility of they're in the range of that missile. It is a new type of hypersonic missile. It's maneuverable, and they can't stop it. So, Russia's got a lot of cards in its deck that it can play, and Europe doesn't.
Yeah, and we don't need to find out. We don't need to see those cards played. That's
Right.
what we need to do. We need to keep them in the
Absolutely.
hand, because everybody can win if we just shut up. We could just end this situation here on the least ugly terms available, and then get back on with living life, because that's possible. We can start the process of normalizing. It'll take a long time, maybe even a couple of decades, but at least during that time, tensions are lowering over a period of time. But if we keep going down this stupid path, it could get hot in a hurry, and everybody's going to lose at that point.
Well, and then you got the other, what makes it so bizarre is that there's not a single leader, at least between Germany, France, and England, that has majority support, popular support of the people. They've all been elected with minority constituencies. So, Georgia Maloney, I guess she's close to having. She did have a popular, got more than a plurality of the votes. Orban did; he got a majority. Fico did in Slovakia. But that kind of fragmentation means these people are really making decisions that don't even reflect the will of the people, and there's growing indications that the average citizen is waking up, going, "Wait a second. We don't want to go to war with Russia."
Yeah, the people don't. That's for sure. The people don't. At least the majorities of them in all these places. And gracious, yeah, I certainly agree with that. That you stop the weapon supply and you'll see how fast they negotiate. I agree with that. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, pull the plug.
We'll have to see how that's going to work out here. But as always, we're really grateful for your insights here, especially the fact that you've sat down with Lavrov before, so probably better than most of the guests we have on here what the Russians really think and what they need to hear to stop it going any further. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, just listen to what they say. They're not like Western politicians. They're not lying when their lips move. They're actually telling you what they think.
Yeah, that's probably the problem, because we're like, well, they assume that they're doing the same as we are, so
yeah.
They must not be telling the truth. But we'll see what's going to be. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you guys for watching too. Always appreciate you. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't done it. Even if you're one of our members, be sure and hit that like button. It honestly helps spread this message more than you may realize, because of all the algorithms and whatever. So you can really help us out by doing that. You can also hit that join button. That also helps us out in ways that you may not realize. And that button right there on go to the homepage there and hit that join button, because that can really help us. And by the way, just kind of a little teaser. We got a show coming up next week that you are not going to want to miss. It is maybe one of the bigger guests that we've ever had on the show. That's saying a lot, because we've had a lot of great people like Larry the Sure Johnson, for example. So if it's even bigger than that, you're not going to want to miss that. More on that as we get into the first part of next week. But you hit the join button kind of helps us do stuff like that. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.